spacecraft is currently undergoing vehicle health checks. It will enter terminal count at T-minus 5 minutes, with the next big step just a minute before liftoff, when Dragon will transition to internal power.
Now, you may have noticed those white clouds around the vehicle. Those are completely normal. They are chilled gas above the LOX tank liquid surface that we vent overboard to maintain pressure in the tank as needed. And when that gas comes out into contact with the warm, humid Florida air, the air condenses into clouds and water. Now,
Here at the eye, Bob.
for now, we should see the
count. Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
The transporter erector.
Dragon is internal
the
count and
transporter erector,
internal
or
power.
The transporter erector, or TE, is used for vehicle rollout and to route propellants and electrical power to the vehicle in preparation for launch. And once those clamp arms have fully opened, the TE will then retract away from the rocket in preparation for liftoff.
We have a hot mic on the countdown net. All parties check your key panels.
Strong back lower has started.
We should see those clamp arms opening in about 15 seconds from now. Now, those clamp arms are located just below the trunk of the vehicle, which is beneath the Dragon spacecraft. And there you can see those clamp arms beginning to open around the booster. Now, in these last few minutes before T0, Falcon 9 is performing final health checks on its primary communications, avionics, and propulsion systems in preparation for flight. And we may hear callouts that engines are sufficiently chilled as we get a little closer to liftoff. Those clamp arms should be fully open, and the transporter erector, that strong back, is going to recline away from the rocket. Now, you may have noticed in some of these shots, the Falcon 9 booster supporting today's mission is covered in quite a bit of soot, and that is because it previously supported NASA Crew 5, GPS-3, Space Vehicle 6, Inmarsat 6F2, and 1 Starlink mission. And you can see that strong back slowly reclining away from the vehicle.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
This launch will bring about 7,000 pounds of hardware, crew supplies, and science to the space station. One research project will study the effects of space on human DNA. Another will study the effects on plant DNA. Findings from both could help us advance things here on Earth, but also prepare us for future, farther missions into space. And Dragon will be docked to the space station for about a month before returning home. Now, checkouts of the second stage thrust vector control actuators are now underway. This is often referred to as an engine wiggle test. This is when SpaceX moves the thrust nozzles slightly to make sure the guidance hardware is ready for flight. SpaceX will do the exact same test on the first stage engines, but that happens just seconds before ignition.
Now, Dragon is also performing its final health checks to make sure all of the vehicle's primary systems are ready for its rendezvous with the International Space Station.
Dragon is
and there's that call out that stage 2 LOX loading is complete. That wraps up propellant loading for both stages of the Falcon 9. And as I mentioned earlier, you may have seen those white clouds around the vehicle.
Ground gas
Those
closeout.
clouds you see are the chilled gas above the LOX tank liquid surface that we vent overboard. And when that gas comes out in contact with the warm Florida air, the air condenses into clouds and water.
Now, Dragon is about to transition into internal power. Also, Falcon 9 computers will then enter startup mode, which is when the Falcon 9 flight computers take control of the countdown, guiding the rocket through the last seconds before liftoff. You should hear a call out about startup shortly.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Dragon is in countdown.
Both stages are now pressurizing for launch. At T-minus 45 seconds, we'll hear the SpaceX launch director verify go for launch.
Go for launch.
There you go. And at launch, the International Space Station will be flying 260 miles over the North Atlantic, south of St. John's, Newfoundland.
T-minus 30 seconds. Fifteen seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition, engines full power, and liftoff of CRS-28. Go Falcon, go Dragon.
Liftoff of about 7,000 pounds of science and cargo, including a new pair of solar arrays to boost power on the space station.
At T plus 40 seconds, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from historic launch complex 39A in Florida. And we're now coming up on max Q in about 20 seconds from now. And this is the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure that the vehicle will go through during its flight.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
And there's that call out that Falcon 9 is supersonic, traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Max Q.
And there you heard the call out for max Q. Coming up next are 3 events back to back, the first of which is main engine cutoff, or MECO, and this is when all 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage shut down. After those 9 engines shut down, the first and second stages will separate, and this is also called out over the nets as stage separation. From there, the second stage will ignite its Merlin vacuum engine to boost Dragon to low Earth orbit during SES, or second engine start one. And this whole
Trajectory
sequence
nominal.
takes about 15 seconds. Should be expecting that call out for main engine cutoff in about 40 seconds from now. Some amazing views of our Falcon 9 vehicle as it takes our Dragon spacecraft to orbit. And in just about 10 seconds, we should see that main engine cut off.
Nico?
Stage separation.
INVAC ignition.
And there you heard those callouts and probably saw on your screen, main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then second engine start one. As I mentioned earlier, we're flying an MVAC nozzle, a shortened MVAC nozzle on our second stage. If you're just tuning in, you're watching a live webcast for the 28th commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station for NASA. This is SpaceX's 38th mission for 2023 and the 4th Dragon flight to the International Space Station this year. We lifted off from Kennedy Space Center's historic launch complex 39A just about 3.5 minutes ago. Now on your screen, on the left side, you can see our Falcon 9 first stage, which is going to descend back towards Earth, and the second stage on the right side of your screen, which is carrying the Dragon spacecraft. Now, as a reminder, today's mission marks the 5th flight for this Falcon 9 booster. Falcon 9 booster, which previously supported the Crew 5, GPS 3 Space Vehicle 6, Inmarsat 6F2, and 1 Starlink mission. In order to make its way back to our drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, the Falcon 9 first stage has 2 more burns to execute. The first is the entry burn, where 3 of the Merlin engines will reignite. This helps slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere. The entry burn is followed by the landing burn, and this is a single engine burn that brings the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land on the drone ship. Now, occasionally with the Falcon 9 first stage on the left side of your screen, you may see some
Both
small
vehicles are
white
in
puffs,
nominal trajectory.
and those are nitrogen gas bursts that are used for attitude control. You can also see there on your screen a pair of the hypersonic grid fins. Falcon 9 is equipped with 4 of these grid fins, which are comprised of titanium, and they are positioned near the top of the first stage. Once in the atmosphere, stage 1 is only using the grid fins for steering as it makes its return to Earth. And these grid fins orient the rocket during re-entry and guide the rocket during its descent. Now, the Falcon 9 first stage has 9 Merlin 1D engines, and each engine generates about 192,000 pounds of thrust. On the second stage is the MVAC engine, which has a slightly wider nozzle, and the vacuum engine generates about 203,000 pounds of thrust. Next major milestone is going to be the first stage entry burn, which will take place just over a minute from now. There you can see an amazing view of our stage 2 with its shortened MVAC nozzle. The Falcon 9 first stage, which is not currently on your screen, has reached apogee and is now beginning its descent back towards Earth. The second stage is continuing to take our Dragon spacecraft to orbit. And we should see that first stage entry burn begin in about 15 seconds from now on the left side of your screen.
Stage 1, FTS has safed.
Stage 1 entry
The
burn
second
startup.
stage on the right side of your screen. And there's that call out for stage 1 entry burn startup on the left side of your screen. The second stage is continuing to take our Dragon spacecraft to orbit. Now again, the entry burn is the first of 2 burns that the Falcon 9 booster performs before landing on our drone ship.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And there's that confirmation of stage 1 entry burn shutdown. As we get closer to first stage landing, it's good to note that the Falcon 9 first stage is equipped with 4 landing legs made of state-of-the-art carbon fiber with aluminum honeycomb. These landing legs are placed symmetrically around the base of the rocket and deployed just prior to landing. And if successful, this landing will mark the 198th time that we've recovered a first stage booster, including both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy missions. We are about 25 seconds away from that landing burn beginning.
Stage 1 transonic.
Now, as the rocket descends through the Earth's atmosphere, this really puts deceleration into perspective. In the span of less than a minute, we'll have reduced from twice the speed of a jet all the way down to 0 as the rocket lands. And as Falcon lands, we may also hear a call out that the second engine will shut off around the same time.
Stage 1 landing burn. Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it. The Falcon 9 first stage that supported today's mission has
Orbital
landed
orbit
for its
insertion.
5th time, having previously supported Crew 5, GPS 3, Space Vehicle 6, Inmarsat 6F2, and a Starlink mission. Today's landing also marks the 198th successful landing for an orbital-class rocket. You may have also heard confirmation of good orbit.
Acquisition signal to Finland.
At T plus 9 minutes and 30 seconds into the mission, we are coming up on the last major task for Stage 2, commanding separation of Dragon a couple minutes from now. And we expect to have video of Dragon separation from the top of the second stage, which looks into the trunk. CRS-28 will be joining the Crew 6 vehicle, currently on orbit, so we'll be back to having 2 Dragon spacecraft docked at the International Space Station. As for cargo, today we will be delivering more than 7,000 pounds of science, research, crew supplies, and vehicle hardware to the orbital laboratory and its crew. To date, SpaceX has sent and brought back over 280,000 pounds of crew and cargo to and from the space station. And we should be seeing Dragon separation about a minute and a half from now. As a reminder, this is the 4th flight for this Dragon capsule, having previously supported CRS-21, CRS-23, and CRS-25 to the space station. Today's flight also marks the 20th reuse of a Dragon vehicle overall. Now, Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters on board, each with the capability to deliver 90 pounds of force. There are 4 pairs of 3 thrusters spaced evenly around the capsule, as well as 4 forward bulkhead thrusters underneath the nose cone. Now, notably, today's Dragon does not have super Draco thrusters, seats, or life support systems, as it's not carrying crew. And this saves on weight and space, and also allows for a faster refurbishment time. While initial designs of Dragon carried solar arrays extended outward from the trunk, the cylindrical structure located directly behind the Dragon capsule, the current Dragon has these arrays fixed directly to the trunk. And you may see at some point both a light and a dark side of the trunk, and that dark side is actually those solar panels, while the light side is a radiator to help cool the spacecraft. And speaking of solar panels, you can see on your screen right now the solar panels that we will install on the International Space Station. Once the Dragon capsule reaches the ISS, it will be able to autonomously dock using its navigation sensors, centerline camera, and light detection and ranging or LiDAR equipment. And there you can see on your screen Dragon separating from the second stage. Well, that's going to do it for me here in Hawthorne.
Dragon
The
separation
next
confirmed.
milestone coming up is the Dragon nose cone opening sequence, which protects the ducking ring and navigational sensors. And I'll toss it over to Shaniqua in Houston to talk us through it. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Zach. Everything is still going well back here in Mission Control Houston. Right after Dragon separated, it began a series of automatic checkouts, including small firings of the Draco maneuvering thrusters. The next milestone is nose cone deploy. The nose cone protects that docking hardware and rendezvous and tracking elements on top of Dragon during ascent. The nose cone deploy uncovers the 4 forward bulkhead thrusters, which Dragon will use for its major burn maneuvers. And we do have confirmation that that nose cone deploy sequence has begun. Again, major burn maneuvers will be Dragon nose cone deploy uncovers those major hardware. It will also uncover Dragon eyes, that rendezvous and tracking hardware that allows Dragon to know where it is in space and how to find the space station. Once open, the nose cone will stay in that position until the very end of its mission, closing prior to re-entry to provide some of that additional protection to the same hardware during re-entry. It does take about 5 minutes for a nose cone to open. We are looking for 12 hooks, 2 sets of 6 that will open here. And once open, we will see the nose cone deploy. Again, that sequence has begun, and we'll be waiting to hear once all 12 hooks are open. And we will see movement of the nose cone as all 12 hooks open. After nose cone deploy is Cargo Dragon will be safely on its way to the International Space Station. If you're just joining us, NASA and SpaceX's 28th commercial resupply mission launched from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 10:47 a.m. Central Time, 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time, and is currently in orbit. We're standing by now for nose cone deploy. Dragon is filled with over 7,000 pounds of cargo and supplies, including a variety of science investigations, hardware, and fresh foods for the crew on station. Some of those fresh foods that will be delivered include apples, grapefruits, oranges, cherry tomatoes, and blueberries. Dragon will dock to the zenith or space-facing side of the Harmony module, just recently freed up by Dragon Freedom, which brought up the Axiom 2 crew. The Axiom 2 crew aboard the SpaceX Dragon Freedom spacecraft safely splashed down off the coast of Florida at 10:04 p.m. Central Time, 11:04 p.m. Eastern on May 30th, 2023. The crew's return officially concluded the second all-private astronaut mission to the International Space Station. Axiom 2 commander and retired NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson ended her 8-day mission with a new record of 675 days in space, the most of any American or woman. And while we're discussing records, NASA astronaut Frank Rubio will end his mission this fall, breaking a record of his own. Rubio will return to Earth aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft no earlier than September 27th, and in his stay aboard the orbital laboratory, having logged a total of at least 371 days in orbit. That tour of duty will beat the previous record of 355 days set by NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei in 2022. Joining Rubio on station are 6 other crew members living and working aboard the International Space Station. Expedition 69 also includes Dmitry Patelin from Roscosmos, Sultan Adiyati from the United Arab Emirates, Woody Hoberg and Stephen Bowen of NASA, Andrei Fedyaev and Commander Sergei Prokopyev of Roscosmos. All crew members are awake, and after enjoying a midday meal, some are headed to exercise, while others are headed to do some spacewalk procedure reviews. NASA astronauts Stephen Bowen and Woody Hoberg are prepping for a June 9th spacewalk to install one of 2 new rollout solar arrays on the space station's starboard side truss structure. This cargo resupply will bring up 2 new rollout solar arrays packed inside its unpressurized trunk.
Acquisition of signal. Good, Heli.
And again, if you're just joining us, we are currently waiting on nose cone deploy of the CRS-28 cargo spacecraft. That sequence has begun just a few minutes ago, and it does take about 5 minutes for the nose cone to fully deploy. After confirmation of that the nose cone has been deployed, we will have a special guest join me for a quick interview. He will talk a little more on what Dragon is bringing up and its benefits to the International Space Station. And back here in the International Space Station room, flight control room, while we are waiting for that nose cone to officially be fully deployed, we will have flight controllers that are monitoring the systems on station itself ahead of Dragon's arrival Tuesday morning. Again, once the nose cone is fully deployed, we will have Cargo Dragon on its way to the International Space Station. Once Dragon does cross that approach ellipsoid, which is that mythical sphere around the space station, flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston will begin joint operations with SpaceX teams in Hawthorne, California. Again, we will have NASA astronauts Frank Rubio and Woody Hoberg, who will be monitoring the approach and arrival of Dragon, with a planned docking time on Tuesday morning at 4:50 a.m. Central Time, 5:50 a.m. Eastern Time. Once Cargo Dragon is docked to the station, Rubio and Hoburg will begin hatch operations to open the hatches between the International Space Station and Cargo Dragon. And again, this is live mission operations of the CRS-28 resupply mission to the International Space Station. If you are just joining us, we are currently waiting on the nose cone deployment of the vehicle. And we currently see that nose cone currently opening. And we have confirmation of nose cone deploy. And there we have it. We have nose cone confirmation of deployment. And now joining me on the phone is manager of the International Space Station Transportation and Integration Office, Phil Dempsey. Hi, Phil.
Hey, Shaniqua.
Thanks for joining me. And as we get into it, can you outline the major activities for the crew with CRS-28? I know we talked some of what's being brought up, but can you go a little more in depth for us?
Sure. During this mission, there's quite a bit of research that has to be done. So the crew will start, unloading the Cargo Dragon. There'll be actually quite a bit of research that's done in time to complete it and return those samples to the ground at the end of this dock mission. As well as that, we're carrying up some IROSIS, external solar arrays that have to be installed with a couple of EVAs during this mission.
Of course, and these resupply missions, just like you mentioned, are delivering science, hardware, and other cargo to the station. I know one key delivery on CRS-28 includes a pair of ISS rollout solar arrays. Can you discuss what the plan is for these arrays and what the importance is for station?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, the ISS program is extending operations to 2030. The robustness of the vehicle has been one of the key factors in our ability to do so. One thing we've seen is expected degradation of solar array performance over time. So these IROSIS will enable us to get back to beginning of life power levels. With this pair on the SpaceX 28 mission, we'll have augmented 6 of our 8 power channels, further enabling the ISS program to continue full research utilization without interruption. That's why we're here in the first place.
Thank you. And as always, I know it's a busy time aboard the International Space Station with cargo vehicles coming and going and multiple planned spacewalks. How complex will the next few months be for the station program and the global partnership?
Sure. Well, as always, there's a lot going on. First we have the spacewalks to install the IROSIS, which I just mentioned. Those are actually some of the most complex that our crew performs. Not long after completing those, we're looking forward to the NG-19 cargo resupply mission later this summer, bring up more critical supplies and research. And then we're not too far away from the next crew rotation missions on both the SpaceX Crew Dragon and the Soyuz spacecraft. So we're definitely looking at some complex choreography, but we've got an extremely capable teams across the world making it all happen.
Thank you so much. And we, again, appreciate you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, and have a great day. It's good to see a good launch today.
Perfect. Thanks, Phil. Join us again early Tuesday morning at 3:15 a.m. Central Time for live coverage of docking for CRS-28. Again, everything is on track on the International Space Station side, so that'll do it for us here in Mission Control Houston. Now back over to you, Kennedy. Jasmine?
Thank you, Shaniqua. Yet another beautiful launch from Florida's Space Coast. And that's going to wrap up our launch coverage of the 28th Commercial Resupply Services mission from NASA and SpaceX. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll leave you with a replay of today's launch. Until next time, go NASA, go SpaceX, and go CRS-28.
And cargo, including a new pair of solar arrays to boost power in the space station.
At T+40 seconds, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from historic Launch Complex 39A in Florida.